Now, welcome back to the second video for the practice assessment. Let's go and see our assessment. So we finished question 1, point A, B, and now we're going to go for C, D, and E. Now, what are we asked? For both stores, for C, find the mean and the standard deviation for the sales. Let's go and see how that works. Again, open your Excel file. I would suggest that you work on your own Excel file and input everything in your Excel file, and then just practice on it. I do not care if you do it the way I have it. Even if you put everything in one Excel file, it's good for me. Now let's go to the second section. Again, let's go back for both stores, find the mean and the standard deviation. West End store and South Side store. To find the mean equals average, and then I go to section 1AB and I select all of the West End store. And from the standard deviation, again a formula, open parenthesis, standard deviation of the West End store. Same for the South side, average, I go back, South side store, I select everything, enter, and standard deviation, STDVA, I select them again, enter. Now you see the mean and the standard deviation. The standard deviation is a measure of dispersion very similar to the interquartile range that shows how far away are our data, our values in the two tables for each store, for the mean. And as you can see, the higher standard deviation is for the West End store. That means that for the West End store, the sales for the days that we've got are further away than the mean, whereas in the South Side store, the sales are closer to the mean. In general, the smaller the standard deviation, the closer our data are in the mean, the measure of central tendency. Now we have completed that, let's go to D. Using the results of your analysis and calculations, comment on the sales performance comparing the two stores. I am putting the comment over here, which writes, the mean of the West End store is higher than the mean of the South Side store, as you can see. However, the standard deviation of the West End store is higher than the South Side store. That means that although the West End store is having high sales, the results are not so consistent every day. Compared to the South Side store, whose sales are very close to the mean for most days. Now, what does that mean? That means that our mean sales for the West End store are 5.45, which is higher than the mean sales of the South Side store. That means that on average, the West End store is having better sales. However, as you can see from the data there, the standard deviation is higher in the West End store, which means many of the sales are a bit farther away than the mean. For example, we have 5.2, which is very close to the mean. We also have 10, which is far away. We have 4.5, 7.9, 7.4, 1.25, 3, 1.7. These, the last ones, are not so good. However, well, the standard deviation in the South store means that most of the values, most of the sales of the store are very close to the mean. And let's see how this works. The mean is 3.46. We have sales 2.6, 2.7, 3.8, 2.5. These are very close, as you can see, to the mean, which means that although the average sales of the West End stores are higher, some of the days the store is doing better. Some days the store is doing not so well in terms of sales. However, the South Side store is more consistent. That means that it is more making the sales as seen by the mean. More or less, the sales are on the average. And that's what you need to remember for the mean and the standard deviation. Now, let's go to the last one. Point E. For the West End store only, construct a frequency distribution table and illustrate the data on a suitable diagram. This relates back to our analysis of frequency distribution that I asked you to read before you do this assessment. Now, how do we work with the frequency distribution? The frequency distribution works that way. We take all of our sales and we put them into classes, class intervals. These class intervals are small distances where we can have our data into groups to make it a bit more understandable and to make the frequency graph later on to see how that works. The way that class intervals work is we find the range, and with the range we try to find the classes. To find the class intervals, what we do is select our range and we divide it by the distance that we want them to have to see how many classes we are going to have. This is one of the standard procedures. However, in our case, it's going to be a bit more simplistic, and I'm just going to put classes that are work for you and are between 6 or 15 class intervals. Based on our range and based on the minimum and the maximum sales that we have from our tables, we can see that the minimum is 1.25 and the maximum is 11.9. Again, we are talking about the Western store. So it would be helpful practically to make classes from 6 to 15 that are connected from 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8, 9 to 10, and 11 to 12. These classes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In these classes, we will select and we will put with Excel how many of sales are in this interval, how many are in here, 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 and here. And the upper limits are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. We use the frequency function now to find how many of our data are in the first class interval, the second, third, and so on until the sixth. To do that, we select all the cells equals frequency, and then I go and select my data from the Western store. And as you are there, comma, go back, the bins array, the upper limit. Then I close the parenthesis, and this is very important, and I press Control Shift Enter. This is the way to do the frequency. And that is that until now. So we see sales for the Western store that are between 1 and 2 are 2, 3 and 4 are 6, 5 to 6 are 12, and so on. So basically we have categorized our data into intervals, into small pools, if you want, that they have in order to make a bit more sense with them graphically. The next step would be to represent the data into a proper graph. To select the graph, I select my class intervals, control, and my frequency. Again, I select my class intervals, I keep control pressed, and then my frequency. And I go to insert, and I insert a 2D column. Any of the 2D columns, either clustered column or stacked column, is enough. You can do 3D, doesn't matter, it's just going to be a bit better in presentation. I'm just going to go with the 2D column. We're not done there yet, however. We have the classes in the horizontal axis and the frequencies in the vertical axis, but our chart is not yet complete. To be complete, we need a chart title, West End store sales in thousands of pounds. That's one. The other thing is that we need to present it properly with a legend. I know it says series 1, but we're going to change it. To change our series, we go right click on the chart, select data. If you go here and see, in the series, we do edit. and we write the name equals sales. And we press OK, and then OK. Now it's a bit more understandable, a bit more professional to what those bars represent. And we're not done there. We need to add axis titles. For the vertical axis, it's the sales frequency, and for the horizontal axis is the sales in intervals, of course, by 1,000 pounds. Once you finish this, that is you done.